the first thing is to look around at your neighbours on your street. Get to meet them. Right, personal relationships. Get to know your neighbours. What are their needs, if they have any? What's going on? What are they involved in? What are the kids involved in, and so on. Start building those connections, and from there, right? It's I know the person who needs this or whatever. Oh, and I have that skill or that competency or whatever. I can follow up. So, it starts at home. It starts from where we are and reaching out to the people around us.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Airdrie Inside. I am your host, Chris Glass. We are at Microacres again. Everything looks great here. It's nice and green. Make sure you check them out. I am with Phil Hoffmann. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Chris. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I've wanted to have you on the show for a little bit of time here. Actually, the time that I thought I need to know this guy's story was at the Shamrock Shimmy, where I saw you tirelessly work hard for that event and then be so happy on the dance floor. And I'm like, this is a story that needs to be told. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thanks very much. All right. So I can tell you a bit about that story, why I became involved in Airdrie. I'll go back a little bit in time. So originally from Australia.
I can tell.
Dual citizen. It's a faded Australian accent. I call it mid-Pacific. Anyway, so I originally came over, Chris, to do a PhD at the University of Calgary way back in the day. And when I left, I wasn't sure whether I'd return to Australia or not. And as it turned out, I basically stayed. So a lot of the early days, obviously in Calgary as a grad student, didn't have much money to travel back to Australia, so I was here. And then, did that, work started coming up, relationships, how that goes, and ended up staying. So my father always had a strong service ethic, and so I always wanted to follow in his footsteps in that way. When my partner and I, Suze Casey, were in northwest Calgary, this is back now 2018, we were looking to move into a place, and we looked at Airdrie, and it wasn't our first choice at first, but we ended up here and haven't looked back. We've both loved it. Every day we say how much we enjoy Airdrie for all kinds of reasons. But when we moved, we kind of looked at each other and said, you know what, let's get involved in the community. Yeah. She's service-oriented, I am, so it was a no-brainer. So we just did. And Suze joined the board of the Chamber of Commerce. I originally started out at the library. One thing led to another. I had time on my hands, COVID, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So time on my hands, and just got more and more involved. And here I am.
Well, it's a story that I've heard from more than a few guests about Airdrie not necessarily being the first choice, but definitely being the last one they're going to make.
Yeah.
And that's a similar story to me. I moved back home. I born and raised in Calgary, moved to Edmonton for a 2-year stint. Couldn't afford to come back to Calgary. I was transferred back to Calgary, took a promotion here with WestJet, and looking for a place to live, ended up settling on a place I could afford, and then realizing this community is pretty special.
Yeah,
and it's hard to find elsewhere.
Yeah, it is. It's special in subtle and unique ways. First of all, there's a strong sense that we're not Calgary.
Yes.
Right? I mean, not originally, but it's been a bedroom community for a long time. People don't like using that term anymore, and rightly so, because Airdrie's evolved into its own thing. So not Calgary is one thing, but also I find a very strong civil and volunteer ethic. Calgary has that too. I would say Airdrie even more so.
Yeah, Calgary, I remember the floods and how Mayor Nenshi had to go on TV and say, we have too many volunteers. We need to slow down because we're starting to run into too many people trying to help. That doesn't happen in every community. But when I see something happen in Airdrie or a need, so many people step up.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a really great place. So let's talk about some of the ways you're stepping up.
All right.
So we mentioned the library. So let's talk about your library journey.
Sure. So as an academic, PhD.
Natural connection.
Right. Not much of a stretch there. So, PhD in philosophy, that's what brought me to Calgary and the University of Calgary. Anyway, so, literacy, I headed up Literacy Alberta for a while in Calgary a long time ago. And so literacy is something close to my heart, books and so on. So one of the first stops I made when I moved to Airdrie was the library to check it out at what is now the previous location, right? And anyway, so the volunteer coordinator at the time looked at my resume and said, you know what, I think we have a role for you. In other words, not sort of stacking shelves, but something else. And it was advocates for the Airdrie Public Library Society. So kind of like a Friends of the Library group. And so I said, yeah, sure. And so I joined that, and before too long ended up taking that on as the president, and did about 6 or 7 year stint there. I've just recently stepped down from leading it. I wanted to get through the transition to the new facility, which we did.
Facility.
I know, it's been a runaway success. The numbers of people attending are just off the charts. So that's been a huge success. The whole Inspire concept and the building, the way it works, I think is working out well. So so that was one piece, the advocates for the library. And then there's a few others just sort of followed.
Yeah, when I look at that Inspire Center, you were volunteering, I was volunteering for Culture Fest yesterday at the time we're recording this. 20 some odd meetings were held at Inspire that led up to that event. Prior to Inspire opening, we didn't have any meeting space. So it was either at somebody's house, which was really inconvenient for a larger group, or online meetings, or where you lose a lot of collaboration. Having a space where the community can go is so important. So important.
For sure. And for quite a while, meeting spaces in Airdrie were very limited. It's better. It's a lot better now.
Yeah, and so great work on being an advocate for what came of that. So, and now you're with the food bank. Yes,
well, that's also been 6 years. Ending my third term, 2-year term, pretty soon in October, and that's been fantastic. I've been on a number of not-for-profit boards over the years in Calgary and here in Airdrie, and it's far and away the one I've loved the most for all kinds of reasons. The cause itself, which is greater than ever, sad to say, but the need is greater than ever, and plus just the morale on the operations side and on the board side. I love our board. It's really functional. It's high level functioning, and we get a lot done. And I'm really proud to be a part of it. So
you touched on the need. Everything's getting more expensive. Everything seems to be getting harder. Talk about food insecurity for a second. And why it should be front of mind.
So food insecurity, and who would have thought, originally when food banks started back in the United States, I'm going to say the 1950s-ish, around that time, they were always only ever meant to be a temporary Band-Aid solution, right? Now, they're so entrenched in not only in the United States, but in Canada and other parts of the world that, like here, they're an essential frontline service. Right? Regarded as essentially like an emergency service. And so they've really become part of the fabric. There are many, many reasons that we could go into around that. But most recently, COVID was a factor. The demand was already, and the need was already increasing, though, regardless. We've got lots of new Canadian families in Airdrie, of course, in Calgary as well. But lots of people trying to make mortgages, 2 parents working, sometimes up to 3 generations in a house, in these big houses we have, and so on, and not always being able to quite make those ends meet.
Well, and people making decent, or what was considered decent salaries too, still struggling.
Exactly.
It's getting so much harder for that middle to make things meet.
The middle class is being squeezed for 100%. Sure. Yeah.
So here in Airdrie, I've had the pleasure of coming out and seeing the facility, and getting to know some of the people doing the work, but what does it take to run a food bank? What goes into that for people who don't know? So
a lot of logistics. The essential model, the business, is fairly straightforward in that food comes in and food goes out, right? So we receive food, or we go out and get it or buy it, and then we distribute that food. But that, the in-between part, the food bank part, there's a lot of moving pieces in there, right? There's the constant turnover, fresh produce coming in and out, and how to manage that. There's, wastage and spoilage, which of course we try to minimize, right? There's, and there's also that balance, Chris, of maintaining privacy and dignity for our clients, but also needing to get minimal information as well, right? One model is ask no questions. We're not quite there, but if you do that, you tend to get a bit more abuse of the system. There's not much of that, but there's going to be a little bit. So we just basically ask to show that our clients are from this area, Airdrie area.
Not driving from Red Deer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then one of the other things, when you talk about the logistics side of it, if you haven't had the opportunity to go sort food or donate some time, I suggest people do it if they can. I was shocked with how much work goes into the sorting, and then and even sourcing food that is food bank ready, and that was something I didn't know about. So,
So sourcing is always an ongoing, work in progress. We need to find sources. Some come, some go, and so on. We're lucky to have a strong support from the corporate sector and also the private sector as well, and residents of Airdrie. So we get a lot of support. But just back to the point you made, it's a really eye-opening experience, Chris, to go to the food bank and do some volunteer work, do sorting, because, we get these big watermelon bins, or gaylords they're called, these massive bins, huge, and they're full of tins or cans, right? And other stuff, cardboard boxes, whatever, from, mac and cheese to you name it. Well, it all has to be sorted. I mean, you've got this massive container of food. It needs to be, before it can be distributed out the door, we need to organize it. So that's a lot of sorting that goes on. A little less so when you get the pallets from the Costco's and so on, and it's all just one pallet of whatever, watermelons or whatever. So then there's a little less, but then there's still always storage involved. So it's a constant moving, warehouse project.
Now, when somebody donates money to the food bank, where does it go? Because I know it goes to covering the cost of the sorting and whatnot. But what other expenses are the food bank?
Well, sure. So there's obviously operational expenses. So, it is a non-for-profit, but we have to remember that it's a business in the sense that some people are paid. We have hundreds of volunteers, but we have a staff as well. So there are staffing costs. There's ongoing maintenance costs, of course. I mentioned that we do need to buy some food. We're fairly fortunate. We get a lot donated from our corporate partners and so on, but there's still food that we need to buy. For example, baby food, baby formula, that kind of stuff. It's in high demand everywhere, and it has been for several years. So, we just don't get that donated, so we have to go out and buy it. And even things that used to be always on our shelves, tomato soup, mushroom soup, that sort of stuff, cans, we've had shortages of those as well in recent years, amazingly.
Yeah, that's disheartening to hear, but at the same time, that somebody's filling that service is good to hear. What challenges right now is facing the Airdrie Food Bank? What's our biggest challenge here?
Just the growth of population and the need that's gone along with that. Right. And so in that sense, we're not alone. I mean, the city has growing pains in all kinds of ways.
Tell me about it.
On the city, right? So kind of similar kinds of growing pains, right? Where you've got needs, demands to meet. Right, they're different from the cities, what you have to provide, but there are just needs across the board because we've got a growing population. So just keeping up with the demand, we're sort of there, but it's from week to week it can be pretty close at times.
Right. In a perfect world, And obviously, in a perfect world, the food bank doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to put yourself out of a responsibility here. But in a perfect world, what would support for the food bank look like from the community, from levels of government?
Yeah. Well, I think advocacy, awareness. Right, stepping up. I mean, and really, Chris, it really comes down to philosophically, right? For a society, where are the society's priorities, and how does a caring, responsible society support people who are most in need?
Right.
And I've got a little story I'd like to tell around that as a sort of segue back to that point. So this is a story that happened a couple of years ago. And for the most part, as I mentioned, because of privacy concerns, we don't know the stories of our clients. They come in, we ask for a little bit of ID, and what do you need? What is your family size? First question. How big's your family, right? And then we go from there. And there's hampers and pantry and so on, right? And so so we mostly don't hear the stories of our clients. This is a different occasion. So our warehouse manager, Robert, was out the back, got a call that there was someone coming in for a food hamper. Right. Family of 3 coming in for a food hamper. So the person came, and it turned out to be a man, younger guy, with 2 boys in the front seat of his truck, about age 4 and 6. Something like that, Robert thought. Anyway, Robert takes a look at this truck. It's a pickup truck, and figures this is a tricked out, truck. It's probably worth $150,000. I mean, not a poor person's vehicle at all. A newer, tricked out pickup truck.
Yeah.
So the guy comes over, and he says, "Yes, I'm here to pick up my hamper," and gets the boys to sort of help out with him and make room for this, and and so on. And the boys being very respectful. And anyway, so Robert helps the guy, gives him the hamper order, and he's about to walk away, and the guy turns at him and looks at him and says, "You have no idea how much this is helping."
Right.
Robert just says, "Oh, and Robert's a friendly, chatty guy, allowed this person to tell a bit of his story.
Right. Story
is that a few weeks previously, his wife died in a car accident. Okay.
Amazing.
So they have 2 boys, right? Now, no immediate family close by. So he's now primary caregiver to these 2 young boys. Okay. So primary caregiver has to do everything for them, loses his job. Right? Because he can't keep up with both. Right? Couldn't keep up with his job, got laid off. He was getting desperate to make ends meet, and until he found someone else, another employer, who was willing to take him on. Okay, right. So gets on with this new employer, but he's still near the end of his rope, right? Because it's been weeks and weeks, and he's got not much money and whatever. And so he's just in the front office and just sort of, going, what am I going to do? And the woman at the front desk said, "You know what? Go to the food bank. They'll take care of you."
Yeah.
And the boss, who was standing nearby, overhearing, said, "Yeah, do that, and take my truck." And flips him the keys.
Oh, wow.
So there's a few things around that jump out. Again, like I said, we don't know the stories of our clients. Another lesson is assumptions, right? Be careful about the assumptions we make. We have this stereotype of who goes to a food bank or who needs the food bank. We don't know that. You don't know that either.
Yeah.
It could be anyone. Could be right next door to you. You don't know. So there's that. And then going back to the point about what sort of society we want. My view, Chris, is that the measure of a society, of a true caring and responsible society, is not how well we take care of millionaires and billionaires, but it's how well we take care of people like that guy with those 2 boys. Right? Because in life, we're all good until we're not good.
Yeah.
Right? It's all good until it's not
God,
good.
go I.
Exactly. And so, right? And that's why society has to be responsible for that. Right?
I love what you're saying about assumptions. I'm a pretty positive person. Yeah. I live a pretty stress-free life because of positivity. I I don't try to assume that everybody's out for bad intentions, and that usually leads to good relationships, right?
Yeah.
Every now and then you're going to meet somebody who
Sure.
is abusing the system or is having bad intentions, but for the most part, people are just trying to do their best,
Yeah.
try to make ends meet. And if you meet them on a bad day, it might be a bad experience, but to not assume the worst in that person and not assume something that you don't know. If you're going
Yeah.
to assume something, assume that they mean well.
Yes. It's not always easy to do, but
No, sometimes it's really hard.
But if we can make that our default assumption to assume the best, you're right. We have better lives, we have better relationships, we have more fun, and life is less stressful, right?
Right. It works out better for you as a person.
That's right. That's right. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to go. And it's interesting to have somebody with a doctorate in philosophy agree with my personal way of going. Tell me a little bit about how your background in philosophy helps you navigate these real world situations, because I don't think they're disconnected. I don't think having a good philosophical background doesn't work operationally.
Well,
so tell me about that.
I agree. So, in universities, there's this stereotype about philosophers or a philosophy department of, how can you get a job with that, right? You'll never get a job with that. Well, actually, employment rates are quite good for philosophy graduates, and they have been all along. And not just good for the humanities, but good, period,
general,
right? And I think a couple of things. One is critical thinking, tending to look at the big picture, being able to sort of stand back and look at the big overall picture, and look at underlying causes. Of course, ethics and morality, right? That comes up all the time. How do we address ethical and moral challenges? And that comes up in life in general, but particularly when we're trying to balance resources, right? Which we always are, in all aspects, right? So
that's a really good point. So let me pick on this a little bit, because I'm a nerd and I go down rabbit holes, and I really got into The Good Place, which created the show on NBC, The Good Place, and it sent me down a rabbit hole of philosophers and finding out some of the backgrounds of some of the things I heard on the show. When it comes to philosophy, what are some of your influences? What are some of the things that you've taken from your education?
Well, thanks very much for asking. I could really go off on a tangent.
We could go for hours now.
Well, my PhD dissertation was in philosophy of science, in philosophy of quantum mechanics. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole as much as I would love to, because you might lose all of your listenership right there.
Yeah.
Because it's, gets fairly technical fairly quickly. However, I am a bit of a generalist as well, Chris, and did ethics as well, and logic, and critical thinking, as I said, and took something from all of that. And I would say, for ethics, for example, there's different theories and schools of thought about how we should be. It's easy to say, just do the right thing. That's easy. But
Google tried that.
Yeah, exactly. But what does that mean? That's where it becomes hard. What does it mean to do the right thing? Or what does it mean to be a good person? Because there's different conceptions about that. So we can't lose sight of the questions. They're important questions, and they're hard and they're tough, and we're always going to keep coming back to them. But we have to keep asking ourselves what that means for us personally and for our communities. So, the basic Kantian ethics thing of treating other people the way that you would want to be treated, which is like the golden rule, which is common in religions. That's a pretty good starting point. So, I like that as a basis, right? That reversibility principle, right?
Yeah.
I treat you. How do I want you to treat me? The same way, in the same situation. That's right. That's right. And you do that, Chris. You give people the benefit of the doubt, and yes, you can get kicked in the butt every now and then, as you said, right, just before. But in the long
it's been quite rewarding for me. One of the things I've had the ability to do with a career in aviation is travel a lot.
Right.
And you hear about this country being dangerous or that country being dangerous. You hear the worst about everything. And then when you get there and you start talking to people and being curious and learning their stories, you get rewarded with such a rich experience.
Yeah.
And I find that's the same way with people. Like if you give people the benefit of the doubt, you're more than likely to have a deeper relationship with them than just that surface transactional level.
Sure. And also just that being open and the openness when you travel, step in, you got to step outside your comfort zone a little bit and meet people halfway. Yeah. You do that, people recognize that and they respond to that, right? And they'll meet you halfway and they'll tell you about their situation and their country and their life. And that's why we travel, to find that out.
Of course. Yeah, you can go to an all-inclusive resort anywhere in the world and get the same beer and the same thing, but learning that waiter story and that I could go on a rabbit hole. One day I'm going to do a whole episode on my experiences in Cuba and bring on a Cuba expert. But, I've developed friendships with people that have lasted 20 years in two countries as they've immigrated to the United States or other countries, and we're still friends to this day, that all started with a conversation and getting to know somebody. So you never really know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
Well, that's I didn't expect to go deep into philosophy here.
Well, it's been a shallow dive so far. But
so far. Well, the quantum mechanics side, or quantum...
philosophy of quantum mechanics.
That keeps me up at night in a way. My brain just doesn't understand it, and I try to. So that'll keep me up all night. So that'll be off camera. I'll ask you about that.
Right. I'll give you the Coles notes when we're done.
Okay. Yeah. I want to pick on something about you personally when it comes to philosophy. You have seemed to dedicate a life of service. Why?
Yeah, so I mentioned my father's service ethic, and it's always been part of my DNA. He was an immigrant too. He was an immigrant from, it was then Palestine, to Australia. Right, during World War II as a civilian internee. That's a whole other long story, right? But brought to not a prisoner of war camp, but a civilian internment camp, like the Japanese were held here in World War II. So he was German Palestinian, transported to Australia with a bunch of relatives on a ship and kept in a camp. And when he was released in 1947, he had a suitcase and that was it, and made his way in Australia. In retrospect, he said, you know what? It's the best thing that could have happened to me. I didn't choose it, right?
Yeah.
But I ended up in this amazing country, Australia, and another of one of the best countries in the world, and started from nothing and made a life for himself. But because of his good fortune that he realized, he gave back to Australia, right? And so here I am in Canada giving back to Canada. Right. It's just, to me, what you do. Right. So, and in the ways we can. So,
Right. And, finding a way to contribute in the way you can is so key. It doesn't always have to be starting a foundation. Sometimes it's just a step. Sometimes it's just a little volunteer shift to get things rolling. Yeah.
And while I'm at it, Chris, I'll just put in a quick shout out for Volunteer Airdrie, which is another of the groups I'm involved in.
That was the last thing I was going to ask you about.
Yeah, I'm on the board for that. And, again, really shows the volunteering spirit in Airdrie. Hundreds and hundreds of volunteers registered. And then we sort of act as a sort of clearinghouse to match volunteer needs with volunteers who are registered, in a nutshell, right? There's more to it than that, but it's that matchmaking service that's important. Now, without that, organizations can do it themselves and find their own volunteers and scramble and do that. And many towns and cities do that. But to have an organized group that does that as a service, that's a good thing, right? Just
as we experienced this weekend with Volunteer Airdrie at Culture Fest.
Yes, and next to Culture Fest, right? The Culture Fest staff working together, helping make sure things run smoothly with traffic control and just, general maintenance and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, that was an example of how things work, right?
Right.
And work well. So, yeah.
So just an incredible depth of giving back to the community. I really like to thank you for that.
Thank you.
I hope more people look at these examples and go, I could help, I could be a part of it. So what's your advice for somebody who's listening to this going, I feel a bit disconnected from my community and I want to get more involved?
Well, the first thing is, Chris, and this is maybe not what you're expecting me to say, but the first thing is to look around at your neighbors on your street. Get to meet them, right? Personal relationships. Get to know your neighbors. What are their needs, if they have any? What's going on? What are they involved in? What are the kids involved in? And so on. Start building those connections. And from there, right, it's, I know, the person who needs this or whatever. Oh, and I have that skill or that, competency or whatever. I can follow up. So, it starts at home. It starts from where we are and reaching out to the people around us. And then in an organized way, there's Volunteer Airdrie, Volunteer Airdrie. .ca, Airdrie Food Bank.ca, and so on. Go online and start looking around, and before you know it, you'll get hooked up with lots of people. There's as much there as you want to get involved in.
Well, that's a great way to end the pod. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Like I said, I've been an admirer of you, seeing you do so much in the community. I'd like to thank you for that, and thank you for being my guest today. Thanks very much for having me, Chris, and I want to thank you and the exciting new City Council we have for the work you're doing. Seriously. I do appreciate that. We're working hard, my friend. I know. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us here on Airdrie Inside. We're going to be back with more great episodes coming up shortly. That's the one. Yeah, there you go. There we go.